Percy works up the courage to ask, what is my destiny? And so the Oracle gives him his prophecy. And for the sake of people actually being able to hear it, I won't do it in my Oracle voice.
That's right, I'm going to do it
But-
in my Oracle voice.
Yes! Hello, and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going beyond Half-Blood Hill to take a closer look at the electrifying mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 9, I am offered a quest. Percy has been claimed, and we are starting the chapter with him moving into his new cabin, and he's going to get a quest this chapter. I'm pretty excited. I think this is a pretty fun, straightforward chapter.
Yeah, no, I agree. It does a good job at keeping the stakes high and in some cases actually raising stakes, which is nice. It is a good, we'll say, cool down chapter in comparison to, again, the awesome kind of glory that was the last chapter in Capture the Flag. We just went over the first big hill on the roller coaster, and now we're clinking our way back up the next hill. It's setting things up, the game pieces are there, and now the game actually starts getting played.
And the anticipation of it is fun. I really enjoy the prophecies and figuring them out, because that's the fun of it. As you finish the novel, you turn back and you go, oh, I get it now. Like, it all makes sense. And that's what this chapter is setting up for. And I think it does a really good job of building that anticipation. I think that's one of the more fun things of having prophecy in a fantasy novel.
I agree. I think that we have been a little hard on some of the prior chapters for setting precedent that the book, either this book or the rest of the series, just doesn't care about. This chapter, I do feel like, sets important world building precedent that sticks around for this series and into the next.
Oh, yeah. There's one big thing in here that I highlighted, and I was like, this is so important. And it's when they're talking later about, like, the importance of heroes and what gods can and cannot do. It is so important as far as groundwork for why the novels exist at all. And you have to have that to buy into everything. And it is a really natural way to accomplish it and describe it. And it fits in with, like, actual mythology, even if it's not a rule from actual mythology. It's all very well done.
Yes. Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves right now. First, we have to feel sad for Percy, because even though he has been claimed something that he was yearning for, he always had wondered who his dad was. Then at Camp Half-Blood, this constant dread of, what if I'm not claimed? What if my father never shows up? What if I'm left wondering if it's Hermes or some other god and I just don't know? And I'm like one of these other wayward, transient souls that is just stuck in this limbo, this purgatory. He gets what he wants, and it ends up being a bit of a curse. There's this line or a couple of lines within the first actual paragraph, and it's where Percy is getting settled into cabin 3. He says, I had plenty of room for all of my stuff. The Minotaur's horn, one set of spare clothes, and toiletry bag. I got to sit at my own dinner table, pick all my own activities, call lights out whenever I felt like it, and not listen to anybody else. And I was absolutely miserable.
Yeah. I think that this in particular is driving home those themes that you're already feeling from Percy having lost his mother figure and wanting to have spent more time from her, right? A lot of the conflict in the chapter, thinking about, because this cabin is supposed to evoke Montauk from chapter 3, thinking about the conversation they had there, Percy was worried that his mom did not want to spend time with him. She told him, I do, and that is important to me. And now he has lost it forcibly, and he's lost it again. And it's so sad.
It is. And the thing that my mind first went to upon and I was absolutely miserable line was in chapter 6, where they're doing the first tour of the camp and looking at all of the different cabins. And he specifically points out how sad and lonely cabin 3 was, and that he was so thankful that he didn't have to live there. He could just leave it be and not have to worry about it, because the hollowness of that cabin was just so depressing. And now here he is. And he even mentions in so many words, he's been an outcast or felt like a misfit his entire life. He finally gets to a place that is filled with people like him, people who are totally misfits by, we'll say, the average person standards. And now, even amongst these outsiders, he's an outsider amongst them. He's treated like a leper. He says he feels like he has some rare disease. Everybody is othering him. And it's just heartbreaking. It
It
is
really
really,
is.
this is where I feel properly like I can't even be snarky at Percy. I know I give him a hard time for being an idiot. This is just like, damn, that hurts.
And I think part of what that is, right, is I mentioned the aspect of it kind of tying into his relationship with his mother. This is the biggest sticking point that says, hey, your father is not around either. And now you have
Hmm.
to know that every single day, and you're not even in it together. Because at least all those other Hermes kids, they're waiting to hear from their dad, or they know that they're never going to hear. And so you're kind of in the in group. And now he's been tossed this bone of like, you're one of the kings, son of the king. Isn't that great? And he's like, no, because you guys are treating me like dicks.
Yes. And they're victim blaming him.
They are.
They're saying that the Hellhound came because he's the son of the sea god. Monsters aren't going to stop it. They're going to stop at nothing to get him. Even though, while that's true, again, the monsters wouldn't be able to enter camp without somebody letting them in, but somehow it's Percy's fault.
And that's the craziest part, to me at least, is all of these kids are blaming Percy for making camp unsafe. When if you think about it for more than 5 minutes, yeah, exactly. Chiron has said explicitly there is one way to get a monster here in camp, and it is to summon it. And that means that either we summoned it for training purposes, or a camper summoned it, probably to play a prank. This was no prank. So every senior camper and anyone who has half a brain should know that, which would explain why the Ares folks don't get it yet.
Yeah, it is. And that is the one benefit of this new clout, is that even the Ares kids, they hate him, but they're leaving him alone. Even Clarice just kind of like curses under her breath at Percy, but she doesn't start anything. I do love how this is categorized, though. Instead of it being a good thing, it's a deterrent. It is a total annihilation. It's a social deterrent for everything. As he says, he feels like he has some disease. And Percy, who is this scrappy Spitfire kid, says, I just wish that she didn't keep her distance. I wish she would just yell or punch me or anything. I'd rather get into fights every day than be ignored. He's saying he feels like he's being dehumanized, as
Yeah.
dehumanized as a half blood can be. But there's a lot of truth in that. And that's a very profound concept for, again, a young adult fiction book. I definitely, when I was reading that, I didn't pick up on that at all. The
No,
idea of being ignored, it strips you of your personhood, basically. What a hell? What hell is that?
oh yeah. And I think what's really, at least from my perspective, it hits home about that is the fact that all of a sudden you look back to those earlier chapters and hearing about how he got kicked out of all those schools and all of the trouble he caused. And suddenly you see those kids that you knew in school that caused all
Mhm.
that trouble, or if you ever were the person that caused that trouble. And it hits that a little bit harder because you're recognizing that was for a reason. Being the outcast, being mistreated, creates exactly that sort of environment where someone is like, I will take any attention. Doesn't have to be good attention.
Mhm.
I just want you to see me as a person, even if it is a bad one.
A bad one. Yep.
It's really unfortunate, but if there's a single benefit, and I'm about to undercut why it's a benefit, he does get one on one training with Luke.
He
And he
does.
specifically mentions that Luke is pushing him harder than ever. and wasn't afraid to bruise Percy up in the process. Looking forward in the novel, that is because he knows that Percy needs to successfully make it to the underworld. That's why he's pushing him so hard. That's why he's training him so hard, is because he knows that he is going to offload, or rather, Ares is going to offload the lightning bolt onto Percy. And so, therefore, Percy has to be able to survive long enough to meet with Ares, get the bolt, and make it alive to the underworld and beyond the gates of the underworld to actually get close enough to Tartarus for the flying shoes to take him down and hand the bolt off to Kronos. So even this, which feels like this one thing where it's like, oh, you get to work on cool Viper beheading strikes, which I am going to interject. I think that's a really cool thing that they get to practice for the wheel snakes, Jack. For the wheel snakes.
For the wheel snakes, of course.
But even this one good thing that he gets is really going to be eventually undercut, and that's disappointing.
It is. It is very sad. It does strike as extra sinister with the benefit of hindsight, or I guess foresight, that Luke is basically fattening up Percy as this sacrificial lamb. It also, I feel like, speaks a lot more to Luke's character of how much of a sociopath he is. He is willing to spend his time directly one on one with this child solely for the purpose of you are going to be stuck in Tartarus. You're going to go through all of these trials and tribulations before then, but you are going to be basically damned for eternity. I am prepping you to be damned forever.
Oh, yeah. And Percy is going to trust Luke, and that is so important to Luke's plan, because when Luke gives him the winged shoes, he needs Percy to put them on and want them.
Put them on. Yep.
And so you know that these training sessions, they're probably one of the best parts of Percy's day. And that is one of those things where when you go back and look at this part of the novel, or you look forward and you see how much Percy laments having lost Luke, when you see how much Annabeth laments having lost Luke to the dark side, you can see why. It's because he put on this amazing front of, I care about you. And we've talked about it over and over again. I care about the other kids at this camp. And even here, where Percy is absolutely that sacrificial lamb, he is still playing up the angle of, but you're my friend. Trust me, you're my friend still.
It's really good. I'm going to be sad once we go away from Camp Half-Blood for a bit and distance ourselves from Luke, mainly because he is such a good character. I'll be sad to see him go for a little bit, but it might be for the best, because I could talk about this guy for literally hours.
That to me is because he is a well-crafted antagonist. And he's not the primary antagonist of this novel, which means everything he does has to be in the shadows. And there's a lot of room to bring it up and talk about it and uncover it and feel really impressed with the writing and all of what that entails. But we are going to spend most of this novel with Annabeth, who is teaching Percy Greek, which is good. Percy needs to learn that. And the other campers are, throughout all of this, just still being absolutely rotten. I cannot believe the way that they leave this newspaper article for him.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, I understand it. From a narrative perspective, it is lighting the fire under Percy's butt and saying, you gotta go, man. You can't stay here. We are taking away sanctuary so that you feel the desire to go out on the quest. But the other campers have to know it wasn't his fault. Now that they know he is a child of Poseidon and that the car exploded and they saw Percy get attacked by the Minotaur, some of them might have even seen his mother die, or die in quotes. So whoever put this on his bed probably knew that they were just being mean. And probably because they felt left out. Probably because they're thinking, oh, you're a child of the big three. Your life must have been so easy. Which does have a certain irony to it, because presumably his life was much harder because he was a child of the big three, at least up to this point.
It isn't explicitly said who put this here. God damn it. I'm going to bring up Luke again. What if it was Luke, though? Like, what if? To light that fire under him and make sure that when this quest does come up, Percy feels obligated to take it. There is a conviction within him that will not cease unless he goes and, one, saves his mom. That's, for Percy, probably the most important thing, no matter what he says. Get Sally. But two, clear his name. I don't think Percy is necessarily a prideful person when it comes to, like, I need my honor. He's not a Zuko, but he doesn't want people bad mouthing him without cause. Sometimes it's warranted. And I don't know that Percy would say you're wrong for bad mouthing him for the things he's actually done. But there's got to be some level of rationale behind it. And this stuff is just totally unfounded.
Oh, yeah. I am open to that angle. I feel like Luke is smarter than that, personally. He's more tactful. Like, we know that Luke summoned the Hellhound to instigate the quest, and that's because he knows that Chiron has to instigate the quest. And the Hellhound lights the fire under Chiron's ass. This newspaper just instigates Percy, and there's not much he can do about it. So I find this more likely that it's some spiteful, like, Ares camper, or someone else who feels slighted. Maybe another Hermes camper who is unclaimed.
I don't know, Connor. Sounds like you took off your conspiracy helmet. I've had mine on these last several weeks, so
I'll put it back on and I'll say maybe it was Ethan Nakamura, the child of Nemesis.
Ooh, and that would make sense because Grover thought that Percy might have been a child of Nemesis. It's all coming together, Connor.
I'm there.
Now, I will say, with this little newspaper clipping, it's obviously, it sucks. It is technically relaying facts, but I do like how when they're talking about Gabe is interviewed, he doesn't really say anything that's untrue about Percy.
This is a lot of things where Gabe is a dick for saying it out loud, but he has 100% told the truth. Percy is a troubled kid who has been kicked out of many schools, and whether or not Gabe did say something, all of that is probably on a record somewhere, and the cops were probably already considering Percy as the number one suspect, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And of course Percy has expressed violent tendencies. I'm sure he's threatened Gabe directly on multiple occasions. He got kicked out of schools for fighting and blowing up school buses with cannons.
Yeah, like, as soon as you start looking into this kid's record, you're probably just gonna be like, oh, it was him.
It seems pretty open and shut.
Yeah, so not the case, and yet any mortal police officer would be like, we got him, boys. Time to call this one in.
I couldn't really fault them for that. That's just good police work, truthfully.
Yeah, that's an Occam's razor. You know, the most likely is what you're going to go for.
But that is neither here nor there. We know that that is not the truth. Percy, good for him, decides, I'm done with this. I'm not going to fester it on anymore. It's time to get some nice, restful sleep where I don't have to deal with any conflict or feeling left out. And he has a horrifying vision. He gets no escape, no respite. This is a classic demigod prophetic dream. Lots of symbolism. It is not exactly subtle in its symbolism. There are these two guys that are fighting each other. They're muscular. They've got beards and long hair. They're wearing these Greek tunics, and one is blue like the sky, the other is green like the ocean. They're fighting and grappling and kicking and headbutting, and they're clearly not happy with each other. The one with the blue robe is screaming, give it back, as the storm is roaring in the distance. And the waves are getting bigger and they're crashing into the beach. And it's very dramatic. And Percy's trying to get in the middle and telling them, he says, stop fighting. He's had enough. And it's so, again, abundantly obvious what this all represents. I don't even think if this is your first read through that you would be confused as to what's happening. It's Zeus and Poseidon, and they're fighting over something. We don't know what that something is yet, but it's something important. Seems like Poseidon took something from Zeus, and then the ground shakes, and there's this deep laughter that comes from under the earth, a voice that is so evil it turns Percy's blood to ice. It says, come down, little hero, come down, which we would think, and this has happened before in the book,
Yep.
Oh, it's Hades. We've got, who are the big three? Zeus, Poseidon. They gotta have Hades there, right? Especially if something's coming from underground, because that's where Hades lives. Now, wonderful red herring, because this is, spoiler alert, this is supposed to be Kronos, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
this whole dream sequence to me reads as, if you didn't get it the first time we gave you the dream sequence, we got to get you caught up because you have gotten more information since then. The first dream sequence has a horse, a symbol of Poseidon, and an eagle fighting on the beach. And there's no
Hmm.
words, there's nothing like that. This time, we're about to get a quest. We are about to have a lengthy discussion about who could it be? Who's the culprit? And so we've got to set up, it's that mysterious voice from beneath the earth. And
Yeah.
Percy is now going to, without any context, go, that's probably Hades. Honestly, it's great setup.
Yeah. And I do love how, even though it's a red herring for Hades, but it's actually Kronos, and maybe this is me reading a little too into it, there are certain aspects of this heavy air quotes Hades character that do signify that it is in fact Kronos rather than Hades. And it's the fact that the voice is ice cold and it sends a shiver through Percy, which, unless I'm misremembering, I think is described as Kronos' voice several times. He has this icy presence to him, this
It
bitter
is
coldness that bears into your soul.
it is so funny that you mentioned that because I have read ahead to make sure that I'm catching details and I'm not going to have another missed Hestia situation. And later on, Percy will bring up this voice that he hears in his dreams to Annabeth, and she got to meet Hades not face to face, but at the Council of the Gods on the winter solstice. And she says exactly what you said. That's not what Hades sounds like. That's not what his voice is like or how he usually talks. And so you are absolutely catching on. So if Percy just went out and talked to anyone and described this vision, maybe not anyone, but anyone of note, right? Your Chirons, your Mr. D's, or your Annabeths, those individuals would all very quickly deduce, wait a minute, that's not Hades. What
Mhm.
is going on here? And I think Chiron is the only person outside of gods that would have the actual context of what Kronos was like to be like, actually, that voice sounds like a different immortal being.
Yes. Yeah. And even just further, just this little detail of, yeah, Percy is slipping into the earth, but what is he falling through? Sand. Like the sands of time. Kronos, the titan of time and the linear flow of it. It's just a neat little bit of symbolism that might just be because they were on a beach and it's the earth, so a happy accident. But I like to think Rick was given a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's this guy. If you didn't
I
catch it with the voice, the sand is there too.
I actually did say the same thing about the sand. So I wasn't even gonna mention it because I wasn't sure if I was just like, maybe it is just a beach and I really am reaching here. I feel validated knowing that you also were like, nah, sand's a time.
We could also both be stupid. That is a very real possibility.
I wouldn't say that we were stupid more than we were both huffing the English minor.
Damn. You got me hooked on that stuff, Connor.
I
What the
know.
hell?
The next small detail is Grover will show up and summon Mr. D will rather have a summons for Percy. And we'll come back to the storm because I do want to talk about the storm that's now roiling over Camp Half Blood. But of course, when we see Dionysus, he's wearing a tiger striped Hawaiian shirt because notably big cats are his animal of choice. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like Poseidon wearing a shirt that is just covered in horses, which I find
Mm-hmm.
just generally kind of amusing. But
He's
I
got to
mentioned I would go
represent.
back to it. He does. He has to represent. And I mentioned I would go back to it. There's this storm rolling overhead. I like that we have this ongoing, ominous, looming presence of Zeus, establishing that, hey, even coming out of this dream, your major antagonist right now is Mr. Lightning Thrower. Okay?
Yes.
You do not need to be worrying about Hades right now. Who you need to be worried about is Zeus, because Hades does not want to kill you yet. I mean, he does, but that's because he thinks that's the fastest way to get whatever you're holding, not
Hmm.
necessarily because he wants you dead. Zeus
Right.
wants to fry you.
Yes. Zeus wants to atomize you. No remains, just sheer retribution in the form of scorched earth lightning bolt.
Absolutely. And so Grover has to set up for us here, which we did not have much earlier when Percy was like, "What do you do when it rains?" And Chiron was like, "What a stupid question. Moving on." Because
I
we
forgot
had
about
to
that.
get
I
the
forgot
answer.
I got mad about that. Like, that's not a stupid question. That's a stupid answer you just gave.
It was a stupid answer, but we save it so that we can have the answer here, such that Grover can explain it never rains here. Also, that we get the payoff later when they describe it as the clouds rolling in and sealing them in like a coffin,
Like
which I
a
know, again, I'm
coffin.
skipping ahead, but it is just
Hmm.
beautiful imagery. And I can just imagine Percy waking up, seeing those clouds in the distance, and going, None of you guys are worried about that? Maybe it's just because I'm a child of Poseidon, but I'm worried about that."
Yeah. I do love the little detail that it's not that it never rains there, it only rains there when they want it to. That's such a fun little caveat. Because I
It
was
really is.
thinking, I like the rain. Sometimes a nice rainy day is good for the soul. You stay inside, you read. It's nice. So I would feel cheated if I was just never allowed to have a good thunderstorm roll overhead. Just a nice bit of, again, building up this cool mystical place that is Camp Half Blood.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
have to have the homecoming to come back to that you're fighting for. And all these little details, they really do add up. But
Hmm.
with all of that being said, Grover and Percy, everybody's feeling tense. They walk up to the big house, and there is Dionysus, as ever, at the pinnacle table, playing his game with Chiron, who I do enjoy that Chiron is just not actually paying attention. And it is noted that he is specifically entertaining Dionysus by playing at all. That's all. Chiron is clearly focused on the bigger things. And I feel like
Oh
Dionysus
yeah.
here is he's trying to distract himself. I don't want to get involved in my dad's quarrel and have to pick a side and all this nonsense. I'm just going to sit here and play my card game and hope that shit, I got summoned to Olympus.
I read it much more as not I don't care and I don't want to care. It's a matter of I need to pretend like I don't care, but I care immensely. This is fucking terrifying.
I like your read better. That's probably more accurate.
Now, here's
Because
something that I also found. This is just a very, very brief aside. It says that Chiron is sitting across the table in his fake wheelchair. Why is he back in his fake? He doesn't need that.
So in
He
Percy
does.
Jackson lore, he feels slightly cramped in it, but he uses it because in the original mythologies, he's killed by quite literally, an arrow to the knee. It's actually a
Yes.
poisoned arrow to the
Oh, that's
leg.
right.
But yes, when he was an adventurer like you, he took an arrow to the
Ah,
knee,
what a
and
great, relevant, topical joke, Connor. We're really going to top the charts in the year of our Lord 2012 with that one.
hey man, I love a good reference.
Nothing but the best for our audience. Back to the actual plot. I do like Mr. D is trying to play kind of nonchalant. I do love this back and forth. He says, "Well, well, our little celebrity. Come closer. Don't expect me to kowtow to you, mortal, just because old Barnacle Beard is your father." A net of lightning flashed across the clouds. Thunder shook the windows of the house. Blah, 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 Dionysus said. I just like that little detail of Dionysus talking back to the storm. Swing your dick all you want, man. I don't care. I'm going to
Yeah.
call it like it is.
He says, "Whatever, Dad. What are you complaining about?" For what it's worth, every part of this conversation is packed, at least to my eyes, with little details that I think make a huge difference. I think it's really impressive.
Oh, yeah. I'm curious if we picked up on some of the same stuff because this interaction before Mr. D leaves for Olympus reads it's comical, but it's also a bit scary because he's talking about just annihilating Percy or turning him into a dolphin. But I feel like if you look a little bit beyond this, again, nonchalant veil that he has put over himself, this shows that he not only cares about the situation and wants to try and rectify it, but cares about Percy.
There's a couple of specific details that catch me. Going forward, every time that Dionysus will encounter Percy, he will almost always get his name wrong. And it is on
Yes.
very rare occasions that he even calls him Percy or Percy Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And Perseus Jackson, if you're at all smart, you'll see that that's a much more sensible choice than what Chiron feels you must do, in comparison to being turned into a dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
That Perseus Jackson alone, underline, highlight, that's the big detail for this whole interaction, because that tells
Yes.
me that everything else Dionysus says, he means it. He
He's saying it with the
legitimately
utmost
thinks
sincerity.
hmm He legitimately thinks that Percy is safer as a dolphin.
Yes. The idea of if I had my way, I would cause your molecules to erupt in flames. We'd sweep up the ashes, be done with a lot of the trouble. And again, that comes off as like sardonic. But Mr. D, when he says, well, spontaneous combustion is a form of harm, he says, nonsense. Boy wouldn't feel a thing. Which, again, funny. But also, I think he's being serious. Like, if he just turned Percy into ash, that is potentially one of the best ways to go as a demigod.
Might
Death that
I
is
add?
instant.
Oh, yeah. Might I add that Dionysus is the god of madness. And
Mm-hmm.
so often, when he encounters people he doesn't like, he makes them go insane. He turns
Yeah.
them mad. So the fact to me that he would go, I would just snap my fingers for you and turn you into a pile of dust, that is a mercy over his general tendency of making your life a living hell instead.
Yeah.
This is an earnest, I'll make it better. You can go die in the underworld somewhere, or you could just be a little pile of ash right
Yeah.
now,
If
and I'll
you
sweep
even
you up.
make it
It'll be
there.
pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
It's this whole thing is I really feel where you get to see that Dionysus does care about these campers. He doesn't like
Yes.
heroes, but he knows that his kids are here. He knows that these are children, and he, for all of his feigning that he does not care, he has some earnest hope that these children will have good lives ahead of them,
Yeah.
or at least as good as a half blood can.
Mm-hmm. I am so glad that we both picked up on that because I thought it was super cool. And again, something that if you had insane foresight, you might be able to intuit. But I only was able to piece some of that together because I had knowledge from the future books, which to me, I feel like is just more testament to Rick understanding these arcs of these characters so early on. And I'm sure he pivoted and changed and iterated as he went along, as most authors do, right? But
Oh,
there is
certainly.
a sense of cohesion that is being set. Book one, we're not even halfway through the first book yet. And that is just so impressive and so cool.
I want to point out another detail that I find to be very subtle foreshadowing that I think you could miss, and I don't think that it is blatant or in your face, but it is Chiron laying down a winning hand he hadn't gotten to use. If you see this as a sort of moral debate between Chiron and Mr. D, this to me is a subtle way of implying Chiron is the one with the correct answer. He had
Mhm.
the winning hand here. That's all. Very subtle
Yeah.
detail. I think that's a little nod that, hey, Chiron is pushing for the actual better solution. Because if Percy just gets turned into a pile of ash or a bottlenose dolphin, the gods still go to war. And
Yep.
Chiron knows that that is far worse than the fate that any one demigod could ensue.
Yeah. The machinations go crazy.
It is contrasted, of course, with something that Chiron then does moments later that I do not like, which is when Grover says, I knew it. And Chiron says, hush, satyr. It's like, ugh, that
No.
is gross. I didn't like that. But nevertheless, Chiron here is back in teacher mode. He's Mr. What did you make of the satyr? You'll meet far worse than that, Percy. All that sort of thing. He's Mr. I don't want to scare you off, but you're going to go on a quest if you accept it. And Grover, he's so excited to go on a
Uh-huh.
quest. And I do find it that much sadder when he will eventually find out what the quest is and be like, oh
Oh
no,
God. Yeah.
why did I volunteer for that? Maybe I don't want to do this anymore.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Which, you know what, man? What the fuck else did you think? You thought it would be something better? You're talking about a quest for a child of the big three. Remember last time that happened? Remember that?
Wasn't great.
It wasn't great. No, actually, that wasn't even a quest. That was just trying to get her back home.
That was literally just trying to keep her alive long enough to get to the safe place.
There was no other objective outside of survive. And Grover, they didn't even manage that.
Not great. Not great at all. But he's excited. At least
He's excited. And that excitement is going to dissipate as Chiron explains really the meat and potatoes of what the underlying conflict is in this book. And it is that Zeus's master bolt has been stolen. And it's not just a lightning bolt. It's not just this tinfoil prop that you see in an elementary school play. It is a 2-foot long cylinder of high grade celestial bronze, capped on both ends with god level explosives. And Percy, always having something to say, always a quip, only responds with, "Oh."
It's hitting home.
Uh-huh.
And that is a big deal. I mean, it's one of those things where I read that last line, it packs enough power to make mortal hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers.
Mm-hmm.
Kids reading this are not going to like really take in how much devastation that is.
Yeah.
Reading this as an adult, oh my God, that amps up the stakes immensely. And of course, as a kid, you're like, whoa, bombs.
Yeah. No, dude, I totally agree. When I read that, I was holding the side of my face like I was Oppenheimer. It's like, oh my God, the desolation.
Yes, it is a big deal. And when you add in the context that Zeus and Poseidon are having their worst quarrel in centuries, Now, granted, that implies, because we know last time Zeus and Poseidon were on the same side in World War II. But this does, at least to me, imply that this is a worse conflict than World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. That is not
or shaping
good.
up to be. It could be really, really bad. And Chiron, as he's saying how horrible this all is, doesn't skip a beat by being an asshole and correcting Percy's grammar.
Well, now that's highly important, clearly.
Now, as funny as that is, I did write specifically in my book, I just wrote "fuck off" because like that is so wildly unnecessary. I remembered why I did not like Chiron in the prior chapters in that one specific fucking line. It's like, God, you fucking prick. Where do you get off?
I will be interested going forward to see if I continue to have this opinion of Chiron, because I think on so many of my other rereads, I'm like, blah, 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 Chiron is expositing, thank you, Dumbledore, moving on. And
I have been so disappointed in how my memory of Chiron is being absolutely obliterated. Because you're right. I think when I first read these, I'm like, oh, he's the Ben Kenobi. He's the mentor. He's the one that's supposed to set the hero off on his journey and make sure that they're equipped for everything they need. And he has just been an asshole like most of the time. And not a constructive one in a way that's substantively beneficial to Percy. He just talks in riddles and corrects him in ways where it's like, dude, semantics don't fucking matter right now. Set that aside. Set it aside. Do you want to feel big, Chiron? You want to feel big right now? Really? That's where your mind is?
oh yeah, it's never the soft, peaceful moments of, wow, that was really great wisdom. It's always, you moron. I have important things to say. Aren't you listening?
Yes,
And
it feels demeaning.
in fairness, he is about to drop a very important exposition that you and I alluded to earlier, which is that Zeus blames Poseidon as soon as he realizes that, I mean, he already blames Poseidon, but as soon as he realizes that Percy is a person that exists, all bets are off because that is the missing piece that is needed. As Chiron says, a god cannot usurp another god's symbol of power directly. That is forbidden by the most ancient of divine laws. And so this is across the series a huge important detail as to why we have quests and a need for
Mhm.
heroes, and it will get brought up over and over again. And I just think it's amazing world building. But it also,
Oh yeah.
again, it sets the stakes. Why me? Why Percy, right? Because you are mortal. You're only half mortal, but that is what makes all the difference.
Yeah, and as he explains that, he goes into what is, for this book at least, one of probably the most important paragraphs, which is explaining the entire conflict.
Yep.
He talks about how Zeus has really good reason to be suspicious, how the Cyclopes forges are under the ocean, which means that Poseidon has some influence over the creators of this lightning bolt, which again, the Master Bolt was the first weapon forged by the Cyclopes. And how the only thing that would be able to really topple Zeus is copies, illegal copies of that weapon. And the only thing that Zeus wasn't really sure about is, well, how did Poseidon get it? What hero would he even use? Well, of course, it would be his own son. What a big middle finger to me. This guy already steals it, and now he's flaunting his son to everybody else, showing that he also broke this sacred oath. And Percy was in New York over the winter holidays and easily could have gone into Olympus. It's really, really fun politics and intrigue. Now,
It
they
is.
talk about Percy's like, that makes no sense. I do not understand that because I didn't know I was a demigod. I had no idea any of this existed. I didn't know where Mount Olympus was, which is true. And Chiron even says most thinking people kind of agree it really doesn't make sense, but it's not about the logic or the rationale. It's about the principle. And that's what this whole fight is about. It's about the principle. Zeus is pointing at Poseidon and saying, "You stole from me." And Poseidon is saying, "I did no such thing. You need to apologize for falsely accusing me." And they keep ramping up and towing the line until it reaches a head. It is one giant pissing match. That's all this is.
When you consider the stakes here of how dangerous this bolt is, a bunch of counterfeit copies of the lightning bolt would be incredibly
Oh,
dangerous.
of course. Yeah, as a
And so
concept, it totally makes sense that that would be, I think everybody should be in agreement. Ooh, this is really bad. We should get to the bottom of this. But Zeus, being a hothead, starts pointing fingers and refuses to use any level of critical thinking. He's
rather
like,
than
"I've made
solving the
my
problem.
decision." Yep,
Mhm.
exactly. And they also talk a little bit about how Poseidon had tried to unseat Zeus before. And Chiron, of course, again, being an asshole for no reason, is like, "I quizzed you on this like a year ago. Don't you remember question 38?" And credit to Percy, he does actually cobble together a coherent answer. Good on Percy. He did pay attention, he retained some information. And he talks about, yeah, there was this golden net, and Poseidon and Hera and a few other gods, they trapped Zeus in it and wouldn't let him out until he promised to be a better ruler. Now, I know we will talk about that. That is one of our myths for this week. And there are some liberties taken with this myth, but Chiron says, yeah, that's basically what happened. And because of that, Zeus has never fully trusted Poseidon since then. That was a breach of trust that could never be mended. So it just adds to, there's obviously, they're immortal gods, a lot of history here that is finally reaching a boiling over point. It's almost like Zeus has been looking for a reason to lash out against his brother, and this is the perfect time. This is the perfect excuse.
Yeah. And it's a real shame because they then talk about what this would look like if it comes to a head, and they describe the world in chaos and this massive world ending destruction that would happen. And then Chiron says it will be so big it will make the Trojan War look like a water balloon
Hmm.
fight, which is such a crazy comparison after World War II and World War One and the
Yeah.
Civil War and all of these other wars have literally already happened.
Yeah,
which all make the Trojan War
a
look like
water
a water
balloon
balloon
fight.
fight. But sure, man, go off. Just toot your horn that you were back there for the Trojan
It
War.
definitely that did stick out to me. However, he did, as a preamble to that, say destruction, carnage, millions dead, Western civilization turned into a battleground. So I got the main point, but yeah, Trojan
Yep.
War, a way to stick with the Greek aesthetic, but not a maybe the best choice.
Maybe not the best
But to
comparison.
really stick the landing, if the Trojan War thing threw you off, he follows up with this. And you, Percy Jackson, would be the first to feel Zeus's wrath. And then it starts to rain.
In Camp
Yeah,
Half-Blood, where it is
it's not
not
supposed to.
supposed
This
to
wasn't a
rain.
scheduled rain.
And Percy, of course, thinks I had brought this storm to Half-Blood Hill. And that again is such a disappoint. Like, I understand why that is what Percy thinks. Percy is the victim here, but it feels like even the other campers do seem to think that this would be Percy's
Mhm.
fault. Not Zeus, not the guy who's literally raining on their parade. This one kid who happens to be caught in the middle of it. And it is so
It is,
disappointing. But how shall that be resolved? Of course, with a quest. This is a fantasy novel, is
of
it
course.
not? So we must seek the counsel of the Oracle. And so Grover, he's like, yes, quest, go, go, go. And so he heads up to the attic. And this is where stuff starts to, at least for me, really pick
It
up the
does.
pace.
Before we
Yeah.
get into the attic, though, there's one last piece of Chiron bullshittery that I've got to point out.
All right.
Percy says, yeah, sure, quest sounds good. I gotta stop this. And if I'm the only one that can stop this, then fine. I have no other option. And Chiron, I can imagine him already looking off into the distance, the big house, all stoically and mysteriously. He's like, then it's time you consulted the Oracle. Go upstairs, Percy Jackson, to the attic. When you come back down, assuming you're still sane, we will talk more. Calm the fuck down, dude. All right? We find out literally right after this what's in the attic. Nothing there's going to make you go crazy. It's spooky. It's weird. It's definitely scary and unnerving. But I didn't get the sense that anything in there was going to make Percy lose his mind. Can it with that melodramatic bullshit. Percy needs help. He doesn't need you setting up these terrifying expectations and them just to like not be that. Just tell them what it is. Stop with the mystery.
So when we talk about some of the Percy Jackson lore related to the Oracle of Delphi, when we're actually discussing the myth, I will bring up Hades has actually put a curse on the Oracle. And so in the past, it has quite specifically driven Luke's mother mad. However, you are correct. This is all flaunting because Percy is the wrong demographic. Specifically, to be the Oracle, you have to be a mortal woman with a specific clear sight ability. And so Percy is not at any risk of
Right.
going insane. Others have gone insane, and so Chiron's like, oh yeah, be scared, ooh, spooky. But like,
It's just not the time for that flourish. Chiron, all right? It's not the time.
it's not.
Can
It's
it?
not.
Stop. You're freaking out Percy for no reason. He's already gone through a lot.
But with that, the next thing he's got to go through is getting the quest. So he goes up all the way at the top of the big house. He pulls open the door to the attic, climbs up the ladder, and the first thing he smells is the smell of
The wheel
snakes,
snakes.
which is weird. And the wheels,
It all goes back to them.
which is one weird that I can sit there and go, you know what? I can actually imagine like the smell of the reptile house at a zoo.
Mhm.
It does have a distinctive smell, so I get where he's coming from. Percy then calls the attic filled with Greek hero junk, which I take personal offense to because I would love to just go like poke through all of the
Mhm.
stuff. I mean, there's stickers that are implying that there is stuff from Ithaca and Circe's Isle and the
Yeah,
land of the Amazons,
Themyscira.
and
Yeah.
you're calling that junk? You're
It's
crazy, dog.
very
You're
it's
crazy.
very like American Pickers. I don't know if you remember that show.
It is.
Yeah.
I do.
It's like I'd love to dig through this attic or this garage and just find a bunch of little treasures that other people would consider garbage.
Including a plaque that says Hydra Head #1 from Woodstock. I looked up to see, like, I know a little bit about Woodstock before today. And there's not like anything that would have implied there would have been a Hydra there. So maybe the reason that Woodstock did mostly go off without a hitch is because there were some helpful
It
demigods
could
there.
be. That's why they were allowed to have all that free
Or
love. No Hydra was killing
I
people.
did have a theory.
Mm-hmm.
Because Woodstock as a festival was described as 3 days of peace and music, if the Vietnam War was another squabble of the gods, there is the potential implication that one of the gods sent the Hydra to stop the mortals from celebrating not having a war,
Oh.
because they're like, no, my war is important and you will enjoy it. And some demigod hero had to be like, stop fucking trying to kill mortals that are just having a good time listening to
Yeah.
music.
So
Like,
Ares.
why?
Ares would have sent the Hydra. Because I don't see
I don't know,
Vietnam
man.
being an inter-god war. I see that as Ares being like, I really need some conflict. Come on, let's get some Agent Orange and White
That is
Phosphorus and Hamburger Hill. Let's go. Come on, let's go over to Vietnam. We got to contain communism.
That's actually painfully accurate sounding now that you point that out.
So great. I love it. That's my
But
headcanon too. Ares sent the Hydra to Woodstock because he hated all the peace and love.
he hated that people didn't like
That
his
is
war.
awesome.
He's like, isn't this great? And they're like,
No,
no.
fuck no. Most people actually don't like this. He's like, well, you know what? Fuck you. You're going to get burned by acid now.
And we then, of course, get the follow-up of the description of the mummy. A human female body shriveled to a husk, wearing a tie-dye sundress, lots of beaded necklaces, and a headband over long black hair. That is a weird detail that I was really curious as to why, and it ends up just being a timing thing, and it makes me wonder if Rick always had the timeline and the lore behind this character written out, even though we won't learn about it until well after Nico and Bianca enter the story
Now,
later
Connor,
on.
I don't remember who this is.
Well, then you will have to wait for the myth notes
Okay.
later this chapter.
I look forward to it. You Chiron bastard. Fucking, oh, you'll find out later.
Okay, hold on. My find out later is in 20 minutes, all right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it, horseman. Whatever. I'll let you have your little flourish of mystery this once.
Yes, I love mystery. And so the mummy reveals that she is mystical, magical, and green mist pours from her mouth, I imagine, to kind of evoke snake-like mysticism, but also related to the actual history and mythology of what might have been the Oracle of Delphi and where people thought they got their power, which is kind of cool. And she then starts speaking inside Percy's head, which is always how you know something is like trying to be creepy. Whenever the voice is like hissing from the inside of your head, you're like, no thanks.
It's very like Voldemort partial tongue.
Yes, exactly. And so she tells Percy, I am the spirit of Delphi, speaker of the prophecies of Phoebus Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python. Approach, seeker, and ask. And I did look up Phoebus Apollo is an epithet of Apollo's that just means bright Apollo, in case you were curious. So Percy resists the urge to just get the hell out of there, which good on you. I mean, hey, honestly, if I saw that, I might have been like, and
Connor, you specifically would get out of there. I don't know that you'd get to the mummy. I think you'd poke your head up and say, this place looks horrible. And it's fucking with my allergies.
Yep, that is
I am gone.
Goodbye. Yep. I will stay downstairs.
I do love the entire description of the Oracle is really, really good. It's creepy and again, very evocative. But I love this line that says the mummy wasn't alive. She was some kind of gruesome receptacle for something else. Just a brutal description. It's this corporeal form is holding space for something ancient and primeval and powerful and definitely not human.
And I loved that he also takes the time to compare her to the different monsters he has seen or ancient forces and goes, she's not like the Minotaur. That thing was stupid and had a one-track mind and wanted to kill me. No. She was like the three fates. These ancient beings that have so much unending knowledge, and that's what makes it scary. Not because it wants to kill you, but simply because it has that much knowledge
Yeah,
Ugh.
you are coming
It's a great
face to
description.
face with basically an intrinsic part of the universe. This is something that is part of the cosmos, that has been a part of the cosmos, will outlive you and everybody else that you will know. It is just a fact of the universe. It's very cool.
Which is just
Uh-huh.
phenomenal. And so finally, Percy works up the courage to ask, "What is my destiny?" And so the Oracle gives him his prophecy. And for the sake of people actually being able to hear it, I won't do it in my Oracle voice.
That's right. I'm gonna do it in
But
my Oracle voice.
yes!
I will say,
But
before we get into the
the
prophecy,
Oracle
just
turns.
really quick, really
Oh,
quick, really
yes,
quick.
please.
Part of the reason I love going through this book again after not reading it for a bit, there's all these little details that I forgot about. I forgot how fucking rad the entire Oracle prophecy process is. I
It's fun.
really love how they explain there's again this green thick mist kind of swirling and coalescing and it turns into people. I totally forgot about that it turns into Smelly Gabe and his
I was
buddies.
I was just gonna mention that I have no idea, but it turns into exactly Smelly Gabe and their poker table. And why? I think just to taunt
Yeah.
Percy, which is so again, it just adds to that like creepiness and unsettling
Yeah.
factor. The
I
Oracle
know you,
says
Percy Jackson. I know you. Yeah.
exactly. Because she does. She knows
Mhm.
everything. And so with this, she says, "You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend, and you shall fail to save what matters most in the end." And spoiler alert now for anyone who doesn't want to hear me break down every single thing. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. That's Denver and Ares. You shall find what was stolen, see it safely returned. That's obviously the lightning bolt. He will succeed at his quest. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend. We've talked about that at length. That is Luke. And finally, you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. Because what matters most to Percy on this quest, and the whole reason he goes on it, is because it allows him to go to the underworld and try and rescue his mom. And to rescue his mom, he has to leave the underworld to accomplish what Hades wants from him. Really well
Mhm.
done. Because I don't think that a first time reader could read this and come to those conclusions and not come to the conclusion that Chiron comes to.
Mhm.
Especially when you follow this all up with the following conversation where they are going to just, "Oh, this must mean this, and this must mean this. There we go. We've solved it. Have fun, Percy." And none of it ends up being correct in what they went for. I mean, they figure out that you shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. That must be
Right.
the bolt. That line is not exactly a hidden
Mhm.
message, but the rest are, and it's well done
Oh
prophecy.
yeah.
I think you can have bad prophecies that spoil your entire novel, or shitty prophecies that you read and you go,
Yeah.
huh? What does that even mean? Especially from the perspective of someone who has tried to write prophecies for things like D&D campaigns. They're hard. They're hard to execute well. And of course, in the TTRPG space, it's a totally different discussion where you can't control your players. But even for a structured narrative like this, building a satisfying narrative tension and narrative irony that allows you to go back on the second read and go, "Ooh, that was really well
Yeah.
done," is hard. And this is extremely well executed.
Wholeheartedly agree. Again, I forgot how much I love the prophecies. So this was a really fun reminder of one of my favorite bits of precedent or tradition, whatever term you want to use, that Percy Jackson will use going forward throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah. It's just well done. And I like that going forward, every single time you get a quest, you will get a
Yeah.
prophecy. There are minor breaks from that, and I actually find them, generally speaking, to be pretty underwhelming. I can't remember when it is, but later on in the series, there's at least one god that's like, "Oh, you're going to need a quest, right? Oh, that means you're going to need a prophecy. Here, hold on. You're going to go do the thing for me. There
There's
you
the
go. There's your
prophecy.
prophecy. Go do it." And it's like, "Oh, that was
Uh-huh.
lame." So I like that in the first novel, we have to get the pinnacle of what
Oh
it should
yeah.
be. And this is that. It is
It's the
great.
blueprint.
And so Percy, he's like, oh, he's mulling it over. He's really, I mean, those last two lines are, they're not
They're
pleasant to hear.
ominous.
You're going to be betrayed and you're
Yeah.
going to fail. And Percy's like, fuck, I've let everyone down already. Everyone hates me and now I'm going to fail. Oh, I'm so toast.
Yeah, and he's really chewing on these and mulling them over. And when Chiron says, what exactly did the oracle say? That is important because the oracle speaks in double meanings. You can't always take what they say at face value. There's no way to know. Some things, yeah, you probably can take them at face value. But the fact that you don't know means that until it's all said and done, everything is up in the air.
And what I find really well done about Percy being scared from a narrative perspective is, of course, that means he doesn't reveal to Chiron. Because I do think if Chiron heard, you will be betrayed by one who you call a friend, Chiron already knows someone, a camper, had to let that hellhound in.
Mm-hmm.
That would just double down all of his suspicions that, like, we should check anyone who has interacted with Percy in a friendly manner since he got here.
Yeah.
Because that's actually not a long list of people. At this point, that realistically is 3 people. Unless you count 2 naiads in a lake. I don't count that.
Yeah.
Seriously. That is Grover, that is Annabeth, and that is Luke. And that is it. And if you were to start narrowing down that list, Chiron's going to go, all right, it's not going to be Grover. So it's just Annabeth or Luke. And one of those is far more likely than the
That's
other.
true.
Chiron could have it all figured out probably right here. But the prophecy must prophecy. So Percy is all, I'm not going to say anything. And so he doesn't. And it all plays out just so well. And I love that we have a page where every single thing that is said is just entirely wrong. Is they're like, oh, of course. So that means who would gain from this war?
Hades.
It must be
Mhm.
Hades. He loves war. He's the war god, right? Right?
I understand the sentiment and the ideas behind why they think it's Hades. Again, as the reader, obviously all of these seeds have been planted pretty explicitly, and some have straight up borne fruit. That's like, oh yeah, Hades is involved in this pretty heavily. I understand the idea of Hades harbors a grudge for being relegated to the underworld, or at least that's what people perceive as him harboring a grudge. And he could use this war between Poseidon and Zeus, have them weaken each other, and then, swoop in and take it all for himself. I get it. It is not ridiculous. Again, we have the benefit of having read this before. It's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. We meet Hades, and he's actually kind of chill. Like, he's not the chillest, but he's kind of chill. This is to say, I think it's an admirable guess. It is, of course, we'll see, futile to try and ascertain what this prophecy actually means, but hubris and curiosity, it's hard to contain them.
Absolutely. I cannot disagree with a single word you just said. And of course, we have gotten so much phenomenal setup here that does make you as the reader go, well, who else could it have been but Hades? And so, of course, you do get this full page where I'm like, I don't think that there is a single thing right here at all.
Yeah, there are some things that are
But
close. I do like that Chiron is thinking, well, with the Hellhound, somebody had to have let him in. We all know that. So there's a spy. He thinks it's a spy for Hades, but
yep,
there is a spy here, and that is not good. So Chiron is now on, if he wasn't already, high alert and should be scrutinizing pretty much every camper that might be capable of forging some sort of alliance or, I guess, like patronship with Hades. So he's not totally off base there. He's not on base, but he's not totally
and
off it.
no, absolutely. That is an important detail to me because that tells me that the moment that Chiron felt he knew who it was capture the flag. And from that point forward, he has not been looking for other options. So he is left without all of the pieces because he has closed himself off to new information. Again, contributes to the adding tension. Also contributing to the adding tension is Grover, now no longer into this. It's like, I mean, I'll come if you want me to, but like, I don't want to go
Which
anymore.
you hold on. You actually just hit on something that was really, I think, might be a deeper theme here, and that is we have Zeus, who is closed off to new information and is being stubborn. We have Chiron, who thinks he has the answers and is putting everything together and is closing himself off to other possibilities. Mr. D did the same thing. He's like, I gotta basically take Percy out as quick and cleanly as possible. The only person who goes throughout this book with fresh eyes and a new perspective is Percy. And Percy actively calls out all of the issues with these theories. That's a
Yeah.
really interesting
You know
theme.
what?
The idea of a fresh
That is a great
perspective being what's necessary to avoid conflict.
look at you. Take your conspiracy helmet off and put an English
That's
minor
right.
hat
I
on there.
did switch. I've
You're doing
actually got
great.
it on top of the helmet.
Oh,
I'm
you're
doubling
doubling
up.
up.
It's
Impressive.
hurts a lot. No mere mortal should do this.
That's really, really good. And I will say, as another important theme here, Grover says, "You saved my life, Percy. And if you're serious about wanting me along, I won't let you down." And Percy, of course, is so relieved he wants to cry because his one friend, his one true friend, is right there by his side. And I know how good that feels to just have someone that you know is going to stick by you. That is what holds a person
Mhm.
steady through the storm. And they are about to weather the storm together. And Grover, this is why I love Grover. He is refusing to let Percy do this alone if Percy will have him. Maybe refusing is a bit excessive, but
It's very cool how we see Grover at first is like eyes sparkling, bright eyed and bushy tailed. Oh, yeah, a quest, a quest. And Percy said I was going to go on the quest with him. This is great. This is the break I needed. Is filled with then immediate despair once he hears some of the gorier details of what's going to have to happen. And in reality, would probably be like, I actually don't need a quest that bad. I don't need this quest. But you're right. Because it's Percy, he stows that selfish reason for wanting a quest and says, Percy needs me there and wants me there. So I am obligated by the bro code to show up for him, just like he would do for me. That is a very
yep.
cool, brief character interaction that, again, I think solidifies the bond that they have, which is very pure, very wholesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, we move to their kind of planning and figuring things out. And one of the details here that caught my eye as something I hadn't considered before is I wonder, Percy, in actual mythology, as we've talked about prior, Perseus is the name of a son of Zeus, not Poseidon. I wonder if Riordan got to this part and realized, why aren't they gonna fly? And I wonder if maybe the entire novel had to get, maybe not the entire novel, but whatever he had up to that point had to get restructured to be like, okay, why can't Percy
Mm-hmm.
fly? Because that would be dangerous because Zeus would strike him down, which means that instead he's a son of Poseidon. And I wonder if that's how we get Percy, son of Poseidon, as
Oh,
opposed to something like Percy, son of Zeus. Totally meta, not
yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
relevant to the story, but this is one of the most natural in world reasons for why can't we do that?
That's a very interesting point. Again, it is speculation, but I like that. That's my headcanon now. You did jump ahead a
Absolutely.
little
And
bit, and there's some juicy bits that I want to dig into. Percy is he's got a fire in his belly. He is filled with anticipation and determination and is like, "Great. I get to go to the underworld. Not only do I get to potentially beat the shit out of Hades, not going to happen, but he's like, I want to beat the fuck out of
nope.
this guy." He also says, and my mom's there. Ha ha, crazy. Who would have thought? My mom's in the underworld. No, I definitely gotta go. There's a little part in his head that says, whoa, boy, you're a kid. Hades is a god. Let's chill a little bit. So there is still a little piece of him that is what he declares sane and tempers some expectations. And he get some more information on why heroes are so important. And we touched on one aspect a bit earlier, but this is the other reason why heroes and demigods are a necessary part of the ecosystem, the dealings with the gods. And it is because gods cannot cross each other's territories except by invitation. It's an ancient rule. It's how it's always been. It's how it always will be. But heroes, on the other hand, they have certain privileges. They can go anywhere, challenge anyone, as long as they're bold enough and strong enough to do it. No god can be held responsible for a hero's actions. Why else would gods always operate through humans. And that is, we now have all the
Phenomenal.
rules. We've got the rules. That is why heroes are heroes. That is why they exist. That is why they are not just smote immediately. They have a purpose. They have a use. And it's so cool.
Little extra detail. Dionysus offered to turn Percy into an Atlantic bottlenose dolphin. Poseidon's palace under the sea, we will learn, is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, which does presumably therefore mean that Dionysus was going to try and put Percy in the safest place possible, his father's own territory, where Zeus would not be able to go and find him.
Good catch.
Just another to emphasize our notations that Dionysus does care.
Yeah.
Again, short
Yep.
detail, but falls right under this detail, and it is so well done.
Phenomenal catch, Connor. Kudos to you. That was good. Now, despite how
And
cool this
you
is
know what else
in
is good?
terms of mechanics, despite all of that, Percy says, truly, my first thought too, which is, so you're saying I'm being used.
Yep,
And
we are. And you're correct.
Chiron says that it's no accident that Poseidon claimed you right now, that it's a risky gamble, but it's a desperate situation. Chiron says he needs you. And then there's, again, this other, and it's happened a few other times in this chapter, and I mentioned it in the last chapter. There's this paragraph break, a single line. My dad needs me.
So well done. And it will set up Percy's internal conflict for this whole novel. Again, I feel like I say that every chapter, that there's something that just adds to how Percy is feeling about this whole situation. And now he is split between my dad needs me and my mom needs me. And how could I possibly choose between the two? Maybe I won't have to. Maybe I will. And if I do, that is going to be hard.
Yeah. Not only split between that, but split between the idea of he's already saying, I feel like I'm being used. This all sounds like I'm a means to an end, but maybe he does need me. Maybe it is the best case scenario, and my dad does need my help. I'm not just a tool. And so, what is it? Is it need me or wants to use me? And there's a very big difference there in how Percy could and should interpret that. One of the things that came to my mind when I read My Dad Needs Me is the idea that so few half-bloods have probably felt that.
Not to bring him up again, but Luke certainly never has. Annabeth, I don't think ever even has. Annabeth is looking to do this for herself. This is for Annabeth when she wants to join the quest. I legitimately, thinking about demigods across the series, there's never such a deliberate God asking for help in a clear, and this isn't even that clear, but this is the clearest we're going to get, outside of Athena literally showing up to Annabeth and being like, hi, I'm losing my fucking mind over here. Go save it.
Yeah. It's just, this is such a cool internal background conflict for Percy. And the way it's described, my dad needs me, period. Such a powerful line. But it's followed by, again, what I think is a really, really great set of lines. Emotions rolled around inside me like bits of glass in a kaleidoscope. I didn't know whether to feel resentful or grateful or happy or angry. Poseidon had ignored me for 12 years, but now suddenly he needed me. I love that Percy doesn't know how to feel. He isn't, maybe he is excited. He's already feeling anticipation that he gets to help his mom. Maybe it's anticipation that he gets to help his dad, or maybe he feels resentful or scorn or all of the above. And he's not really going to be able to come to terms with those feelings until, if I'm remembering correctly, the end of this book. I think there is a meeting with him and Poseidon, correct?
There is, because he goes to Olympus to give back the lightning bolt in person, and Poseidon shows up. And Poseidon is actually the first person that Percy addresses, and Zeus is all, excuse you, I am the king here. Me, you talk to me first. And he's like, give him a break, I'm his dad. And Zeus is like, I'm the dad of everyone. All right, I rule this land.
Yeah.
That might not be a quote, exactly,
you know, in so many words. I just, these few lines, my dad needs me, Poseidon ignored me for 12 years, now suddenly he needed me. I put big stars next to it, I highlighted it, and I am going to try my best to keep this in mind for that ending encounter.
Yeah. It is so important to have that tension of Percy doesn't know how he feels. Because if Percy is just like, I don't like him, not interesting. If Percy is like, oh, of course my dads need me, not interesting. So this is important from a
Yes.
narrative standpoint. But outside of a narrative standpoint, this probably again just continues to make Percy hit a lot of those different things that actual people might be feeling. How often can a child actually feel like their parent needs their help? And when that does happen, how does that make a child feel to be put into that position where the weight of their parents' problems is on them?
Yeah.
It's this responsibility that is at one point so much honor. You feel honored for them to trust you. And at the other point, how could you put that on a
Oh
child?
my God. That sense of power or honor, as you put it, dilutes pretty quickly, depending on what the situation is. Helping out a parent, like use the printer, that's where it's just like, I'm flexible.
Yeah.
My parents need me, right? But once it comes
Yes.
to larger, we'll just say adult issues, yeah, it is a,
Yeah.
a very, I'm trying to choose my words carefully. It's a very fine line.
I'm thinking of it is a very fine line. I'm thinking of specific examples from people I know in my life who have had to take up responsibility, sometimes at no fault of the parent at all, where it's like, hey, we are in a tough situation, and now all of a sudden a child has to take on more work. Something like that, that really should not be the responsibility of a child. And sometimes it is things that is unfortunately placed upon them, right? Absent parents that come back and say, hey, I want to be a part of your life now, but I need this thing. That is also exactly what this
Yes.
is, right? It hits on so many different levels, and I think so many different people from across a wide spectrum of personal experiences could really relate in so many different small ways. It's very well done. It's
Yes.
very well done.
I agree.
And you know what else is very well done?
I'm
Annabeth's
Now,
reveal
Annabeth's
here that she
reveal.
has just been doing
There
the
is
whole
something that
time.
is not very well done that happens before that, though. I think,
Oh,
which is Percy looking at Chiron and saying, "So you've known that I was Poseidon's son all along." And Chiron said, "I had my suspicions." Which makes
yeah,
literally everything I was complaining about in the first few chapters even fucking dumber.
that much worse. Yep.
I will not retread old ground. You guys can go back and listen to those episodes. I would be repeating all of my issues, but if you do go back and re listen to them, make me sound even madder with this knowledge in mind.
Valid though, because it is. It's every single time that they were like, "We don't know who your dad is," and Chiron's like, "Tee, I
Yeah,
do."
don't worry. Let's run down the clock. Yeah, he's really important, and I'm here at this school to watch over him, and he might be a child of the big three, and I've got this prophecy that nobody else knows. But you know what? Let's keep gaslighting Percy. How fucking
And now he's got
stupid can you
10 days.
be? Exactly, because now he's
Yep.
got 10 days. 10 days!
I remember the conversation that you and I had in chapter 1 when we were discussing if Chiron had called it right then and there on their field trip sometime during the spring semester, they would have had months
Mhm.
longer. Months longer. Chiron is no stranger to prophecy. He knows that this shit is
Yes.
inevitable. There is no avoiding it. So just bite the bullet and do the thing. Save the day. Tell the kid that he's got to go on a quest. And then you have so
And
much more time.
if they wanted to have this timer and this time crunch, you know what they could have done? They could have made Chiron smart. They could have had Percy come to camp and they say, "We have until the summer solstice." And so we've got some time to prepare you for the harrowing journey ahead. And then, oop, big rug pull surprise. Rather than it being the summer solstice, which I'm sure is, I think that's like Jupiter's day, or there's some like relevance to why it's the summer solstice. But again, they could have said, "Oh yeah, they changed the deal. Now that Percy's been claimed, Zeus actually made the end date the spring equinox, which is 10 days away." And then it adds into like, "Oh fuck, now we've got this timer. We don't have all this time. Zeus is being a dickhead. It seems like he wants Percy to fail. I feel like it would all work, and it wouldn't make Chiron seem so fucking incompetent.
I mean, you could also just make it so that Chiron arrives at the school much later.
Or that! there are no shortage of ideas that I think could make Chiron not come across as totally incompetent, while also maintaining the high stakes. And the high stakes, they outweigh everything. All right. So this is me nitpicking and getting frustrated over things that are specifically pet peeves of mine. But they do not detract from the story as a whole.
Exactly. If we're gonna do the Cinema Sins dings, absolutely,
Uh-huh.
100%. And it is what it is. But it doesn't, as you said, it does not detract from the novel or the experience of everything else. And after this, Annabeth appears, and we get our very first Seaweed Brain and Wise Girl. I've been waiting a long time for this quest, Seaweed Brain. Athena is no fan of Poseidon, but if you're gonna save the world, I'm the best person to keep you from messing up. You tell him. And then finally, if you do say so yourself, I suppose you have a plan, Wise Girl? Their dynamic is golden. I love them. They are perfect.
The banter begins.
It's so good. It's so good.
I do love.
And there is no time to waste.
I love how her introduction is not just shimmering out of thin air. She does do that, but it comes with Percy says, "Gee, who else would be stupid enough to volunteer for a quest like this?" Me.
Pick me.
I'm stupid enough.
Annabeth is just like, please. I'm not stupid. I'm smart enough. I'm smart.
I feel like the aura gain that she had from being invisible that entire time and revealing herself kind of comes out in the wash, because she did reveal herself when Percy was asking, who would be dumb enough? What kind of idiot would follow me? So it's neutral aura.
Like, obviously, Grover's gonna. Because he's my
That's
idiot.
right. Exactly. We're idiots together.
There is, of course, no time to waste, Chiron said, because he wasted all the time already. So you should go get packing.
And
fantastic.
We're off to the races.
Next chapter, I'll have to eat my words, because Argus is apparently who drives
Yes! Yes! Connor! Oh, my favorite guy is back. I told you he was more important than you were letting on. I knew it.
You were so right. You were so right, and I was so
Never
wrong.
doubt me again.
But here at the base of the big house, we've gotten our prophecy. The kids are off to go pack and get ready for their quest. And you and I have some myths. Starting with not the one that you wanted to learn more about, but we'll get there. Let's start with Hera's revolt, because this one was hard to find. And I appreciate that you took some time, Jack, and helped me get the information I needed, because this is such an obscure reference, especially for the Percy Jackson novels, which at least early on tend to stick to pretty well-tread ground. So this was an odd one in that it is no more than like a couple of paragraphs, maybe a page out of the original source material in one place. So let's start with the in-universe Percy Jackson lore for Hera's revolt. So we heard mention that once upon a time, Poseidon was part of a plan to overthrow Zeus. They captured him with what Percy says is a golden net. And perhaps Percy is just misremembering and mixing that up with a different myth with Hephaestus and Aphrodite and Ares, because there is no golden net here, especially not in the original mythology. But we do have the Percy Jackson lore, which describes it as golden chains woven by Athena. So, Hera, ever upset with Zeus and his constant infidelity, and this time apparently abusing his power, says, all right, I'm done. I've had enough. She gets Poseidon, her brother, Athena and Apollo, some of her, we'll say, stepchildren.
I don't know. That family tree is just a bush. It's a tumbleweed, not even a bush.
It really is. I think stepchildren is close enough, and she gets their support, and so it's Poseidon, Athena, Apollo, led by Hera. And that evening, after Hera's like, I got this plan, the gods all hide in Zeus's palace, waiting for Hera to say, all right, come get him. And Zeus falls asleep, and they take these unbreakable golden chains from Athena, and they use them to take Zeus and completely lock him up, make it so that he cannot get anywhere. He is unable to move. And they say, all right, we've got you. And Poseidon, in the Percy Jackson lore, is the one that attempts to reason with Zeus and say, please, you need to be a better ruler. And Zeus refuses, outright will not take them at their word. He refuses. He says, I am a good leader, and without me, everything shall crumble. So Hera says, all right, we'll just leave him here then. Bye, honey. So they all leave, and Zeus is pissed, and he's screaming and yelling and thrashing, and they're trying to have a meeting. And as this meeting is ongoing, the meeting I think is actually from the original version, perhaps. Doesn't matter. Either way, in all of the noise that Zeus is making, there is a Nereid that hears Zeus's cries, and that is Thetis. And so Thetis goes to Zeus, and Zeus is like, you have got to get me out of here. Thank you for helping me. And Thetis says, well, I have one condition. You cannot throw the dissenters into the pits of Tartarus. Zeus agrees, and so Thetis goes and finds the 100-handed one, or the hecaton charis. That's a tough one. But they're giants with 100 hands. What more information do you need? And so, because these are described as incredibly strong beasts. So one quickly goes into Zeus's room and just tears up the chains. Done. And so then Zeus is released. He punishes those who disobeyed him, except for Athena in, again, the Percy Jackson version, where they are actually given punishments. But apparently Hera is chained above the void of chaos. And every day, Zeus would show up, threaten to cut the chains with his master bolt, and let her die.
Hold on, wait a minute. This is the Percy Jackson lore?
This is the Percy Jackson version of the lore. All of this is added in later. So, Zeus shows up every day and threatens to kill her for who knows how long. And apparently, Hephaestus could hear his mother's pitiful screaming from all the way on Mount Olympus. And as he could not bear to listen any longer, he shows up and he sets Hera free because he is Hephaestus and he's smart and he could do that. And apparently Hera then after this promises never to call Hephaestus ugly again. And that's why Hera and Hephaestus are on good terms in the Percy Jackson universe. Now, the part that was actually very hard to find, the Percy Jackson lore, really easy. Right on the wiki for Hera's page, no problem. The actual lore comes from a single section of the Iliad. Not a recorded myth anywhere else. It may have been perhaps a oral passed down tale. Hard to say. But in this version, what is happening is Achilles is sitting there and he's like, oh, by the way, Achilles' mom is Thetis. This is relevant because he's like, Mom, why aren't the gods helping us? Why are they still fighting? And Thetis is like, now, I can't just go make all the gods not fight anymore. And Achilles is like, wait, but remember that exact time that you told me that you did that and you made them all not fight anymore? Wasn't that nice? And Thetis is like, shit, I know where this is going. And so Achilles sits there and tells his immortal mother the same story that she has told him. And he talks about how at one point in time, there was a conflict between Hera and Zeus. And notably, it was always between Hera and Zeus. So the fact that Poseidon is lumped into this for this chapter and made to be such a bad guy is absolutely Zeus's ego. Fine, fair enough. Hera, together in this version only with Poseidon and Athena, not with Apollo, does almost succeed. They have Zeus in shackles, here not woven by Athena or anything, just They shackled him up.
They got the shackles.
And Thetis arrives. Exactly. Thetis arrives, and in this version, she simply brings along the 100-handed one, and all he has to do there is stand there and be like, I'm really strong. I'll kill you guys. And they're like, shit, good enough. And they stop. And that is the whole myth. So the Percy Jackson version actually adds a ton. I don't really have a ton to add to this. It is just kind of fun. We have one little line from the Iliad that Rick must have gone, ooh, that serves me. We're going to use all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I feel like the concept of a godly coup is ripe for some fleshing out. So if there are more aspects to that, Hera attempting to usurp Zeus, hopefully they haven't been lost to time. Hopefully it wasn't just oral tradition. If there is more out there, that'd be really cool to know about.
Yeah, if anyone does have more primary sources on this, we would love that. We were struggling to find anything more than this offhanded mention in the Iliad. But let's get the meat and potatoes, I would say, of the myths for this chapter. The Oracle of Delphi.
You've been waiting for this one.
I have been waiting for this one. And it's fun. There's a lot of really cool detail here. So we're going to start with the actual mythology that leads to the Oracle of Delphi, because it's pretty short. Percy Jackson lore here is extremely straightforward. So Apollo will eventually bless the women who are the prophetesses of Delphi and are Oracle. Generations and generations of Oracle. And in all we have in the Percy Jackson universe is a very straightforward version of the story, because these stories are fairly straightforward. There's a lot of different versions, but each version is mostly saying the same thing. The Percy Jackson version says that Leto, who is the mother of Apollo and Artemis, when she was looking for a place to give birth, because Hera cursed her and said, you will not give birth on any land on this earth. And so Leto's like, fine, I'll go find somewhere else. On this journey, she was looking for a place and she considered Delphi, and she was chased away by Python, who at this point was the controller, and this is the big difference of Percy Jackson lore, is that Python is the controller of the Delphic Oracle in this version. And so Apollo shows up and he's like, hey, you didn't let my mom give birth here. You're going to die now. And he kills him. And notably, Python in this version uses he, him pronouns, because that is actually something that flip-flops between different versions. And in honor of Python, Apollo says, great, now I shall name the Oracle Pythia. And that's it. And most versions are very close to that. So in the version that comes from Homer's Homeric hymn to Apollo, notably, first of all, Python is a she, her, and Apollo basically is just establishing himself as a new god, was just born, shows up and says, hey, you, Python, people don't like you. Dunk, and a single arrow and he's dead. And that's it. Or she's dead. And that's literally the whole thing. And he lets the corpse rot and says, me, I'm the Oracle deity now. And that's the whole version. Now, there are other versions that make very subtle changes to this very straightforward version of the story. Some say that Apollo used 100 arrows. Ovid says it's 1,000 arrows in his Metamorphoses. Other versions have much more to do with the Leto side of things, as the Percy Jackson side does. In Euripides' version, Leto brings her twins, which are the young babies, after giving birth to them. And upon seeing Python, Apollo is like, oh, I jump out of my mom's arms, and you're dead now. And that's it. Again, that's the whole story. Other details that can change is sometimes Python was chasing pregnant Leto. Sometimes Python attacks Leto and the twins when they visit Delphi. And in one that I did find to be a particularly fun version, a Greek geographer from 63 BC named Strabo says, no, Python, that was just a really shitty guy with the nickname Draken. It's not an actual dragon or serpent.
He's just
like a warlord. And Apollo doesn't like him.
Oh, watch out. Here's the dragon.
I mean, he's like a king or something.
Awesome.
And one little last detail. If you were wondering, yes, the word Python does actually originally come from Python, the Greek character, not the other way around. We don't have the word Python for snake first. We have the word Python for this guy first. Kind of neat. That is pretty much the whole story of Python. Not much to it. But it sets up what is one of the most important pieces, probably, of Greek history, or at least a pivotal place across the Greek world. Because for a lot of people, and for parts of time, it was believed that Delphi was the center of the world.
Wait, it's not?
Let's take a step back. Oh no, I can't believe I ruined that for you.
Man.
I'm sorry.
I hate these myths. Fuck.
So let's take a step back and let's talk about what I was talking about a moment ago with Percy Jackson lore. Because there is a reason that that oracle is sitting there in a tie-dye dress. And we have to get there. So the first most important rule is that in the Percy Jackson lore, the only way that you can become the Oracle of Delphi is you have to be a mortal woman with the gift of clear sight. Clear sight being the ability to see through the mist. That's it. That's all that you have to have. And so in the Percy Jackson universe, right around the start of World War II, or right before the start of World War II, the Oracle gives the first great prophecy. And this is the prophecy that Chiron has been alluding to in this very chapter that I know and you don't know. And it is that a child of Zeus or Poseidon or Hades would make a choice that will inevitably lead to the destruction of Olympus or save Olympus. And of course, this does eventually become Percy. However, at this very moment, Hades has two children, Bianca and Nico D'Angelo. And so Zeus says, you got to ship those guys off to Camp Half-Blood. But Hades, smartly, does not trust Zeus to let them be there safely. That is Zeus's domain. Reminder that Camp Half-Blood does not even have a cabin for Hades. So, Hades goes to the Oracle, and the Oracle advises Hades to hide his children quickly. Hades, however, does not want to hide his family. He feels it is unfair that he should have to get rid of them, especially when Hades is one of the most devout individuals. He has a woman that he genuinely loves and wants to spend time with, and his two children that he is having a family life with. But it does not matter. Hades must do something. But it's too late. He waits until after the deadline. 1 week after the deadline that Zeus gave, your children must be in Camp Half-Blood by this time, Hades still has them in his home. And so Zeus says, fine, I'm going to take matters into my own hand. And so he sends down a lightning bolt trying to kill the whole family. Hades manages to protect Nico and Bianca, as they do appear. However, their mother is killed. Hades says, this is your fault. And he points at the Oracle. And he curses her. He says that as long as his children remain outcasts, and he is forced to labor under her great prophecy that she gave, so that's why it's her fault, that he would never allow her spirit to pass on to, or rather the spirit of the Oracle to pass on to another host. And that even after her death, the spirit would never move on, and it would continue to speak prophecies, quote, until her body withered away to nothing but dust. And that is why she is wearing a tie-dye dress and a mummy. It is because, and I wonder if Rick Riordan had always planned that this would have been this way, because if this woman was alive during World War II, she would have probably died sometime around when tie-dye and the 70s and all of that was in.
Mm-hmm. So sometime in like the 60s.
And there you go. Or 60s, 70s. You know better than I do modern history. So, that also does have one little other detail, and I won't go too deep into this one, but I did briefly mention that Luke's mother actually does go crazy, insane, because of her interaction with the Oracle. That is specifically because after being told not to do it by Hermes, Chiron says, yeah, go for it. Try and take on the spirit of the Oracle, Luke's mom. And so May Castellan tries to do it, and she fails because the Oracle cannot leave its current body. The process does not work, and she is cursed with horrible visions about Luke's future, leading her to go slowly insane.
Thanks,
Yay.
Chiron.
Yup. So, let's get to the real myths. There are 3 terms that we need to first set structure for. First is Delphi. Delphi is a place.
The
The
center of
actual
the world.
Oracle of Delphi, exactly. The Oracle of Delphi is the person who gives prophecies at the center of the world, and she is the Pythia, named after Python. Finally, the other term that is going to be operative here is a Sibyl. A Sibyl is just a Greek prophetess. That's all that is. Why that's relevant, though, is because at Delphi, long before there was an Oracle of Delphi, there was just the Delphic Sibyl. So Sibyls existed many holy sites across the ancient Greek world. Delphi was notably one of the most important, no doubt. So that is why that one goes on to gain its own notoriety, especially as religions change. So we have records of a Sibyl at Delphi from as early as 1100s ish AD. So, or not AD, BC, sorry, from around the 11th century BC. And that record comes from Pausanias, who's an ancient Greek geographer, traveler, writer, and he's actually from around the mid 100s AD. So he's way in the future, but he has this written record. We also have geological records that would imply that prophecies have been being given at Delphi since as early as 1400 BC is the earliest estimates for the shrine's date. However, it wasn't always, again, this Delphic oracle of Apollo. Apollo likely actually co-opted the temple, or more accurately, his followers co-opted the temple sometime around the 8th century BC. So sometime in the 700s. A lot of
That
stuff.
is a lot.
So I'm
Marinating right
keeping
now.
track of my notes. So, what then do we know about these original prophetesses? They were, first of all, at Delphi, they were the Pythia. This was specifically the title of the high priestess at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Only there. And the high priestess was also the oracle. And it was actually a very renowned and important position. This was probably the most prestigious oracle among all of the Greek world. And that made the Oracle of Delphi, the Pythia, one of the most, if not perhaps the most powerful woman in all of ancient Greece, and perhaps even one of the most powerful women in the world at the time.
Huh.
So, the Oracle was this notable figure. And across history, people would go and they would seek her out and they would get her blessings, her prophecies on all of these things. So Apollo, realistically, how did he become, and what was it before that this temple was? How did he become the main deity of this temple? Well, originally, we know that it was a temple to Gaia. That's kind of why, or perhaps tied to the notation that it was the center of the earth. And so therefore it was dedicated to Gaia, and Gaia had actually tasked in the mythology Python to look over this place. And so perhaps it is why we have this story of Apollo coming and killing Python, who is in some versions a child of Gaia or a servant of Gaia, and taking over the temple for himself. And that's probably why the story is so insignificant as just Apollo showed up, he killed Python, and now it's his. Because the actual scholarship that we have and stories that we have of this time basically just says Apollo showed up to some guys on a boat and said, "Hey, I know that you weren't going there, but I'm Apollo and I'm telling you where to go now. You're going to go over there and you're going to make that temple mine. And you're going to sing lovely songs and give lovely prophecies for me now." And we have specifically Cretan bronzes and Cretan sculptures from around that time period. So the Cretan bronzes are from around the 8th century, notably when the temple switched its patronage. And the sculptures can be dated to slightly after that, not that important. And these Cretans were notably worshippers of Apollo that brought the faith of Apollo and their cult and set up there and made this temple all about Apollo. And from that point forward, you could go to the temple and you could consult the oracle for 9 months out of the year. Only 9 months though, because she has to take a break
And
sometime.
honestly, I love that. We love a good work-life balance.
Actually, what's really interesting about this is there's a couple of reasons, and we're starting to get into, there are a lot of speculations around this. This is a huge part of history, and there's surprisingly little definitive record on what the process was like that we can count on and know that it was accurate. So one such thing just says, hey, winter was a time of Dionysus, and it is actually also claimed that Dionysus's tomb was at Delphi. And so perhaps they just took 3 months in the winter and they celebrated Dionysus instead. Other theories are related to why the Oracle of Delphi was so important, what made her prophecies different. And people have speculated everything under the sun, from marijuana to different other drugs to literally natural gas leaks beneath the temple. Yes, I'm serious. That is a reason that people have given. And with that reason, one of the speculations for why the priestess might have taken 3 months off in winter is that natural gas is less active in winter because of the
Oh,
cold
okay.
air. That is all
Of
highly
course.
speculative, and I am not an expert in this science. I like the history, and I want to tell you about the history. So I will leave you to go do your own science research, but it's really interesting. And so she took 3 months off and literally gave prophecies until the late 300s when the temple was burned down. And we even have historical records of some of the oracular statements across history. There's a Wikipedia page, I'll link it in the show notes. It's really cool. Not all of them are believed to be entirely accurate, but who cares? They're so fun, and they're this wonderful arc because they end with the oracle not giving a prophecy and saying, "My home has been burned down. I cannot see the future." Here, hold on. I'll go find it because it really is cool. So the last prophecy that we have written down, which again may or not actually be true, is a Roman emperor sought the prophetic power of the Delphic oracle and sent someone to go and take a prophecy. And one of the last prophecies that was given by the Pythia at that time, forever, was, "Tell the emperor that my hall has fallen to the ground. Phoebos no longer has his house, nor his mantic bay, nor his prophetic string. The water has dried up."
Damn.
And that was the end of all prophecy at Delphi. It's a really cool
Wow. Yeah.
story. I feel like I didn't do it justice, but there's a lot to
I
unpack
didn't
here.
realize
It's a really
how
interesting.
deep the stuff with the Oracle was. Because I knew it was a place, but I guess I'd never looked into it. I just assumed that the Oracle was a mythological character that people were like, oh, yeah, they existed at one point and the gods spoke through them. I didn't know that they were like an actual person, somebody that people consulted.
And a big deal at that. They're
This is
really cool.
really cool.
I implore you, go to the show notes. Check these out, guys. It's not a lot of reading because each one is a few. Some of them are structured in poems because largely the Oracle of Delphi was said to give prophecies in poetic structure. And at the heyday of the Oracle, it was usually noble, well educated women that were selected for this very important role. And over time, as history went on and it became slightly less important, but still this profound cultural touchstone, it went from these noble, rich, well educated women to we will embody the spirit of the peasantry. And so they would choose peasant women instead. And so what would have to happen is the peasant women would give just in prose, here's your prophecy. And then later, scholars would change them into these more poetic forms as opposed to just the written prose.
That
It's
is
really
really
interesting.
God,
So,
I wish we still lived in a time where you could just be like, yeah, this is what's going to happen because I huffed some paint fumes. I saw it in my vision.
I mean, if you want questionable advice, Jack, just go to
That's
Google
true,
AI.
actually. I was going to say, as I was talking, I was like, unfortunately, maybe we haven't evolved too much. But you know what I mean? It'd be great to be like in this position where for 9 months out of the year, you just kind of get to sit in this really cool, like, temple, and people say, tell us what's going to happen. And you say, you freestyle rap at them, and they say, thank you so much. And that's it. That's the job. And you're getting high the whole time, probably. That's great. What a great deal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, except for the fact that many of them did die early deaths, probably because whatever they were pumping
but
them
they went
full
out
of
on
in
top.
the natural springs or whatever they were drinking from
They went out
wasn't
on
great.
top, Connor.
They did.
And that's what matters.
Again, it's unfortunate that there were so few opportunities for women in the ancient world, but this was one of the few places where you could truly exercise independence and power as a woman. When you became the Oracle of Delphi, you gave up all obligations, no matter what your station was. You gave up everything and you became a priestess, and that elevated your station, and you no longer had other responsibilities.
It sounds like monastic in a sense.
Yes, very much so. But that is the Oracle of Delphi, inspiration for the name of this very show. So, I hope you all have enjoyed today's show, and I hope you will listen in next chapter as Percy, Annabeth, and Grover begin their quest.
That's me being excited, in case I wasn't clear.
I'm glad you're excited.
I am so excited. I feel like in this next chapter, this is where all of the pieces have been set on the game board. We know the rules now, and now the game can finally be played. We all get to see it play out. We have our characters. We know where they're going to go or where they're going to try to go, and the adventure properly begins. They're leaving the tutorial area, and I'm super excited.
Oh, me too. Absolutely. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. But that is where we're going to leave off today's episode. And we are going to pick up exactly there as we get this story on the road, quite literally. We'll see you next chapter. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support our content, please be sure to leave a review, share with your friend, and follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle. I like the Oracle.
That was a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. Genuinely.
I'm glad. The Oracle isn't quite as like, whoa, this is astounding as like the Hellhounds are, but it is like this consistent,
I'll be honest. I would say it was a lot more astounding for me just because it's like, oh shit, this is like real. This was like a real thing.
I'm glad.
That'd be like, that's the equivalent of if you were like, yeah, well, you know, Hercules, the real guy, Hercules. You'd be like, wait, what?
That's a fair point. Yeah, no. It is insane that kings and emperors for thousands of years, literally 1,000, almost 2,000 years, went to this person and were like, I need your advice.
And they were just zooted out of their fucking minds.
Actually, again, that's the thing. It's like, that's
my interpretation. Are you kidding me? That's great.
These people were regarded, though, as like figures of authority, especially when the women were coming out themselves and giving these prophecies in effectively poetic form. They were giving prophecies that were going to be heard by kings and emperors and important people, and they were presenting themselves as scholars themselves of their own right by the way they formatted their words. So, like, sure, they might have gotten the prophecy while they were zooted off their ass, but when they presented it, they were people of power. Like, immense power. It's so
Yeah.
cool.